that we have a demonstrable problem with males in the next generation. The culture of men, the evolution of men, the growth of men, who they are, where and how they are being guided or not being guided, and how they're being distracted or led astray in a way that's really interfering with their growth and their potential, and in turn, like the growth of a healthy society.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for the kind words. I think I said when I came in, we went through all the podcast invites we have, and I just mentioned your name, and before I even finished it, like half my staff just went ape shit. You deeply resonate with a lot of people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, look, this is something that I'm passionate about. I think the data is overwhelming. 3 times as likely to be addicted, 4 times as likely to kill themselves as women, 12 times likely to be incarcerated, 70% opioid epidemic. We don't have a homeless problem. We don't have an opioid problem. We don't have an incarceration problem. We have a male suicide, homeless, and incarceration problem. And if any other special interest group were committing suicide at 4 times the rate of the control group, we would talk about it in different terms. We would talk about the need for social programs, intervention, empathy. But when something like this happens to young men, there's a lack of empathy. You hear words like accountability, or if they were just more in touch with their emotions. And I think that's really gotten in the way of a productive conversation. And because there hasn't been a productive conversation and people out there feel and see what's going on, some voices have entered into that void that are sort of unproductive voices. And sometimes that kind of this pro-man rhetoric oftentimes is just simply veiled misogyny or a lack of empathy or kind of what I'll call the manosphere. It starts off fine. It's be action-oriented, be fit, take control. But then it goes to really weird places that treats women as property, or talks about immigrants taking your job, or just sign up for my crypto university. It just goes to weird places.
It's also been a bit of a third rail issue to raise the peril of the wayward young man in a world in which the conversation around elevating certain sectors of culture and society is about women and people of color. And yet, the quote that I've heard you often repeat is, the most dangerous person in the world is a man that is broken and alone.
If you look globally, the most unstable, violent societies in the world all have one thing in common. They have a disproportionate amount of young men with a lack of economic or romantic prospects. What do? We send them off to war. If they don't have economic prospects internally, they'll overthrow the government. So we find conflict and we send them off to war. Also, this younger generation of men is paying for the unfair advantage you and I had growing up. I was born in Los Angeles or Southern California in 1964. I hit the lottery. Being born a white heterosexual male just had huge advantage in California.
Myself as well. I was born in 1966. You went to UCLA. I went to Stanford. I'm the beneficiary of, an incredible education and privilege. And now that, access to what you and I had access to is all the more remote these days. Like, what is going on? Like, how did we get to this place? What are the tectonic plates that have led us to this situation that we find ourselves in?
So just to make the point around accessibility, I don't know the numbers in Stanford, but when I applied to UCLA in 1982, the acceptance rate was 76%, and it cost $1,200 a year. And I had to apply twice, and I got in. The acceptance rate this year will be 9%, and it's $34,000. So it's just inaccessible to anyone who's not remarkable or rich. So how did we get here? I think there's been a variety of things, a confluence of factors that have all collided around young men. One, there's just a lack of empathy. People see it as a zero-sum game where if you feel empathy for men, it must mean that you are anti-women. And so there's a lack of empathy and what I call zero-sum gaming it. Civil rights didn't hurt white people. It helped them. Gay marriage doesn't hurt heteronormative marriage. It enhances it. So to talk about empathy for young men is in no way and should in no way be seen as anti-women. I think the group that wants more viable young men is first and foremost mothers. That's who I hear from the most, who see what's going on with their daughters and the difference between their daughters and their sons, and also women. Women are, I think, ready for more economically and emotionally viable young men. Women are dating older and older because they're having trouble finding what they would perceive as viable young men. So a few things. One, just biological. Men's prefrontal cortex matures later. They just don't have the same executive function or adult in the room. They're less mature, literally less mature. Two, we have an education system that is biased against them. If you talk about the behaviors we reward in school, you're essentially going to describe a girl. Be organized, be a pleaser, sit still. You also have an education industrial complex. 92% of kindergarten teachers are women. There's more female per capita fighter pilots than male kindergarten teachers. It's about 70, 80% K through 6 and about 60, 70% in high school. And naturally, you're going to empathize with a little version of you. So I just don't think there's the same level of empathy for young men. We've also done away with metal shop, auto shop, wood shop. So the guy who's not cut out for college, who doesn't sit still, who's not academically focused, has fewer and fewer on-ramps into a middle-class lifestyle. And then these guys get into the workforce. There's fewer middle-class trades jobs. In America, parents have done a really good job of convincing themselves they've failed as a parent if their kid doesn't end up at Stanford or UCLA. So there's a lot of rage and shame in the household. There's not visible on-ramps into a healthy middle-class life. 3% of LinkedIn profiles in America say apprentice. It's 11% in the UK. In Germany, 50% of Germans have some sort of vocational certification. That's not true here. It's kind of become this, you either get to Stanford or UCLA or you and your parents have failed. And then a lot of dynamics, dating apps, where you have 2, 3 to 1 men to women. And you also have this effect where because everyone has access to everyone, not everyone, but women who have a much finer filter are all drawn to the kind of what I call same guy. So you have 50 men on Tinder, 50 women. 46 of those women will show all of their attention and interest to just 4 guys. So it's great to be in the top 10% on a dating app if you're a guy. The bottom 90, it's really difficult. And the bottom half of men on dating apps, where now 1 and 2 relationships begin, get validation that they have absolutely no worth in the dating market. So a lack of economic prospects, a lack of maturity, a society that doesn't seem to have a lot of empathy for them, and then a mating market that validates they don't have a lot of value. And you see these men go down this downward spiral where they start, and this is where you know we've really lost them. They start becoming ultra-nationalist. They start blaming immigrants. They start blaming women. They become prone to conspiracy theory. In some, they just become really shitty citizens. Mm-hmm. And the final thing I would say is that the most profitable, valuable companies in the world have one thing in common, and that is they're tapping into a lack of regulation and instinctive flaws. Men are more risk aggressive. So the fastest growing technology sector right now is gaming, which is a polite way of saying gambling. Men are more risk aggressive. They like to gamble. 85% of gamblers are men. They're 4 to 6 times more likely to develop a gambling addiction. You then put it on a phone, and you have Kevin Hart and Charles Barkley telling you that you're smart and you should bet on March Madness. And then you have social media apps or Robinhood or Meta or YouTube sort of tapping into these instincts, these flawed instincts of men, where they become prone to conspiracy theory, much more risk aggressive, much more inclined to develop a relationship with you porn as opposed to saying, okay, how do I go out there and develop the skills in the game and the economic and emotional viability to find my own romantic partner? They're mistaking Reddit and Discord for friendship. Mm-hmm. They're mistaking Robinhood and Coinbase for making a living. They're mistaking YouPorn for establishing a relationship. And so a lot of these men have had the real world or the motivation to find real relationships replaced with algorithms and screens. It's a low entry, low risk cost of having a reasonable facsimile of life. And if you're not careful, you wake up a few years later, you don't have those skills and you're depressed. Because getting out and finding a job, getting out, going into work, getting up, putting on a tie, learning how to read the room, learning how to make a woman laugh, establish body language, be persistent, endure rejection. You know, there's a reason romantic comedies are 2 hours, not 15 minutes. This shit is hard and it's humiliating, but that's what real victory in real life looks like. And I think there's a disproportionate or a small number of young men who are ever going to experience that real joy and that real victory because of the low cost, low entry, reasonable facsimile of life that these companies prey on.